And for the next quarter century, you did Horton Smith, John Barnum, Walter Berkmo, and Dave Hill. Now, what a classy group that is.
Yeah, it's really, I kind of talked about how it went from golf from, Walter Hagen's day just being kind of a select sport, and then it got a little more national notice, and then once the Masters started, and Horton Smith was the winner of the first Masters, so
the third,
so it made sense to put him in there.
In golf, the champion of the Masters earns the coveted green jacket. Well, now you can own one, and not just any jacket, but the one given to the first winner of the Masters. And as Terrell Brown reports, many collectors of golf memorabilia had no idea where it was until now.
To win the Masters, as Australia's Adam Scott did this spring, is to reach the pinnacle of professional golf. And the prize, the green jacket, the most sought after in the sport. The first green jacket was awarded to Sam Snead in 1949, but he wasn't the prestigious tournament's first champion. That title belongs to Horton Smith, who won in 1934 and again in 1936. 15 years before the green jacket became synonymous with Augusta.
And he came here after he served in the military, and really after his main playing career, and was a club pro here then. And he won the Michigan Open. So I included him because I thought he's golf history walking down the street. Plus, everything in golf education is named after him. Every state section, PGA section in the country gives a Horton Smith Award to the leading person on golf education. The national PGA does too, and so obviously he's had an incredible impact on the game.
The thing I remember about him is he had huge hands, and he put his hands around the golf club. The golf club couldn't even see it.
Horton Smith, the troubleshooter.
There are days when every golfer feels that he should have stood in bed, when his every swing seems to have a duffer on one end and a divot on the other, and when his cry of four is followed by a cry of phooey as he windmills through 18 holes of what was once his favorite pastime. Even Horton Smith, eminent professional, has to take to the practice grass upon occasion. Here at Pinehurst, North Carolina, he shakes a few kinks out of his irons preparatory to taking to the tee.
Even see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never met him. I didn't know that.
And he was a great putter, a great putter.
They did say he was the first guy to really study putting,
yes,
and decide that could be a huge advantage if you really studied greens and putting and the putting stroke and all that. And he did it, and a lot of people followed suit. And then John Barnum, I picked him. He kind of became famous because after age 50, after he'd worked at Blythefield, another Blythefield pro, he had gone out on the tour and he played it, and he won the Texas Open, which then was a PGA Tour event, and so he was the first guy over 50, and there's only been two of them to win their first event after that age on the PGA Tour. And also he did it with a ping putter, which made him even more, because the ping putter went on to become incredibly famous, and they catalog them all and they record all the victories that ping putters had, and number one is John Barnum. So I thought he was kind of remarkable, and he played really great in the Michigan Open. He was a dominant player. They said he never lost in the local West Michigan section. He was just dominant.
I loved to see him. He walked like majestically, like the Queen Mary or something, crossing the ocean, just so smooth. Big guy, real big guy, and just so smooth.
Yeah, and they said he could hit it a mile, and he was really cocky. He would, somebody would get introduced on the first tee, and he'd look at him and say, "I'm impressed." He wasn't impressed at all. So he mostly impressed himself. And then,
how about Big John Barnum from over in Grand Rapids?
Well, Big John, and Big John is right. That's the way he was. He's a big man, and he had that little gait. He had a special walk that a lot of the pros used to imitate him, and yourself, you've done a pretty good job imitating John's walk. He had a special gait about him, and he was a big man. I don't know, he must have been 6'5" or 6" at least. And but he could play. He was a friend of Walter Berkmo. They traveled together, him and the Abear brothers. They were always traveling together and played together practice rounds. And John was from Blythefield on the west side of the state here in Michigan, and a pro there for many, many years. I forget how long he'd been there, but he's still one of our outstanding players in the state of Michigan all these years.
Walter Berkamo, who's another just a great name from
Local guy, from Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit guy, Polish Hall of Fame. You know, and really a talented guy. I guess he could have done any sport he wanted. He was, but essentially they said he was an incredible athlete, and from what I could find, he was a dominant player. He went out on tour and won. He came home and worked as a club pro. He really dedicated himself to the job. The people at his clubs loved him, which is a big thing, because they don't always like the guys that go off and play all the time, but they liked this guy. So that means he had both sides of the job covered.
Well, he was terrific. He was at Franklin Hills, and then he was at Detroit Golf Club for a long time, and he was one of the greatest match players of all time. That's where the PGA Championship was, that match play back in those days, and he wanted that match play, and so did Chick Harbert. But we mentioned Stahl about being out as the teacher to the stars. Walter Berkamo was in that very same class out there at Palm Springs. Yeah, he was very big out there.
The Michigan Golf Hall of Fame roster is loaded with major championship winners, and Gene, you've played with a number of them. How about Walter Berkamo?
Walter, you couldn't help but like Walter. Walter was a friend of everybody, had a great heart. He'd help anybody out that was ever in trouble. I know there's some stories on the tour with any caddies that were down and out. He'd be one of the first one in line to go to the hip, as they say, and he would help them out. And but a great player, and if you watch him, there's something about him that he could have won more, I felt, because of his ability. But he's very casual, but he excellent player.
But I met Dave Hill several times and wrote about him several times, and he played on the senior tour in Grand Rapids. But he's just such a great character, and the things he said and did. I mean, he played his best U.S. Open was the one where he criticized the golf course as a cow pasture, at Hazeltine. And
Now we're talking. You grew up on a farm, 66-acre farm. We're talking about corn, and one of your more famous famous quotes was up at Hazeltine when you said.
That's right. Open.
You said what?
Hippopotamus mouth. I just said they ruined a good cow pasture. That's all. A good corn. I said they ruined a good farm. That's what I said. They ruined a good farm.
And a few years later, didn't Trent Jones ask you back up there?
Well, they made. Yeah, I went back up there. They made 32 changes in an 18-hole golf course. So I had to be right. Yeah. And they turned it into a wonderful golf course, because I was up there when
they had the Open when Payne
Stewart won it.
Right.
And I'd played it the year before when the U.S. Open, the senior U.S. Open was in Chicago at Medina, and then the next year the regular tournament was at the seniors U.S. the regular U.S. Open was at Medina.
Right.
Then they went from there up to Hazeltine, and I went and played Hazeltine, and what a beautiful change they made,
Well, it just shows you that they're not always right the first time, are they?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It was, everybody agreed, Like I tell everybody, I got all my lines from Arnold Palmer because I played with he and Ray Floyd the first 2 days.
And they weren't quoted.
No.
Or not as colorfully as you.
But I can tell you that the second day, first day was cold, windy, and I three-putted the last 3 holes to shoot 75, and then we had to tee off real early in the morning, and we get in, and I'm upstairs with my buddy. We're having lunch, and they kept coming and bugging me about going to the press, and I told them I didn't want to go to the press because, they weren't going to like what I had to say. And so I finally go over there, and by that time I'd had 2 or 3 vodkas and 7-Ups, and I didn't really give a darn what I said, because I knew I had to go practice. And so I walk in the locker room after the interview, and Arnold says, where have you been? And I said, well, Arnold, I've been over in the press stand telling them what a wonderful, fantastic, unbelievable golf course they had. He jumped right out of it. He sat with Bob Rosberg. And he jumped out of his chair, and he said, you little SOB. He said, I thought if anybody would tell them what they had here, you would. I said, well, Arnold, you may have to apologize to me tomorrow morning.
like that all the time, and he got me really good in Grand Rapids once because it was like the second tournament in Grand Rapids, the senior tour. I mean, Dave and Massengale had come in with a good score, and Dave was on 18T, and he hit a drive, and it hit a top of a tree and went out of bounds. There's a range right next there, and it went out of bounds at the Old Highlands, and so of course, everybody's looking at me, and I'm the Grand Rapids guy, so I got to ask him the hard question at the end. So I asked him, hey, did you consider another option there? And he just called me a you-know-what that you can't repeat, and said I wasn't playing for second place, and that was it was pure Dave Hill. And so, but 5 minutes later, he's talking to me and answering my question. It was the timing and having to do it in front of the TV cameras was not good.
He was great. He was a great long iron player. He and George Knudsen was his buddy, the Canadian, were great long iron players. And to watch them, they were like artists with the 2 irons or 1 iron, which, we've lost that these days. And we can't forget Dave's younger brother, not much more younger, a year and something or other, Mike Hill, because Mike was a terrific player and won on the tour. He had a number of tour victories, and as a senior, he partnered with Lee Trevino, and they were one of the top group in all those team tournaments that they have on the senior tour.
Oh yeah, Mike was really a tremendous senior player, and it's just Dave, because of his comments. Dave was always a news story waiting to happen because he would say something. He's the guy we like to be around. We got to talk to Dave Hill because he might say something.
And he usually did.
Yeah, and Mike was quiet. In fact, Mike, when he said something, was usually he's mad at you because you wrote about Dave instead of him. So it was different guys. But they were both really talented. The Jackson, they were the Jackson boys, and they were always really good. And
Country Club of Jackson has done a great job in bringing along their caddies and then moving them up into the stardom. And it's still one of the top clubs in Michigan now.
How about the Hill brothers, Dave and Mike from Jackson?
Oh boy, you got two boys there that created quite a record for themselves. And Dave jumped out of the box there pretty quick and did very well. And of course played the Ryder Cup team, and he was probably the best putter I had ever seen. To me, I just felt he could make a putt from anywhere. I don't think he'd ever miss, and he had confidence, which you must have when you play that league. And of course, Mike was probably the most consistent through the years, and of course did marvelously well, and of course ended up on the senior tour and doing excellent. And 2 great players. I guess they're still in the golf business. I think they own their own golf course, and they maintain it and keep it going. Once in a while, you'll see Mike's name jump up on the senior tour, but and play once in a while. But 2 great, that family, great golfers.
Well, we're with Jim Cole, a past president of the Meadowbrook Country Club, here in the grill, and Jim has a lot of history stocked in his mind about this club and everything that's happened here. Jim, tell us a little bit about what we see here behind us.
All right. As I understand the situation, a year or 2 ago at a local golf exposition, Chick Harbert, his 2 daughters, approached our club manager, identified themselves, told him that they, of course, had grown up around the club and would like to come back and see it, and could that be arranged? He, of course, said it could be. And when they came over, they brought with them some memorabilia, if I've said that correctly, relating to their dad. And so on the wall behind us, we have a picture taken in 1942 of Chick, who is second from left in the picture, with Bing Crosby, Jimmy DeMeritt, and Byron Nelson. Beneath that, we have the 1949 U.S. Ryder Cup team, Chick Harbert being second from the right in that photo. And then if we go over here to the 2 photos on the right, we have the 1955 Ryder Cup team meeting with President Dwight Eisenhower in the White House.
And Chick was the captain
Of that team. And then we have the 1955 Ryder Cup team with Captain Chick Harbert in the center. And then finally, due completely to serendipity, my wife and I have a daughter that lives in Sarasota, and one of her best friends in her subdivision is married to Paul Azinger's manager. So for this year's Ryder Cup team, where Paul Azinger is, of course, the captain, Tommy Elliott, his manager, had made up this montage of the photos of all of the Ryder Cup captains, and those that are still living have signed the original. The original is in Mr. Azinger's possession, but Tommy was kind enough to make this copy for us in our club.
That's pretty good, more than a souvenir. That is outstanding. And Chick was the golf professional here at Meadowbrook for a long time, and he was known for his prodigious tee shots. And this was back in the days when it was persimmon and the balls weren't always exactly round. But tell us a little about Chick and his driving exploits.
What I know of it, I learned secondhand, and that is that he was invited back at age 70. And our first hole measures some 330 yards, and it was said that at age 70 he could still drive the green.
When you came back and got into being the club pro's life, that seemed like your game really picked up then, and you were a dominant figure here in Michigan golf at a time when Walter Berkemo was still playing. Mike Suchak was the pro at Oakland Hills, and you won the Michigan Open successive years, 1965, 66. You won the PGA Championship. You won virtually everything. What were those days like?
Well, for a couple of years there, things seemed to work pretty good. I was more at ease. I don't think I was trying as hard, trying to win all the time. Not that that's not bad, but maybe you can go over the edge a little bit, and I seemed more relaxed and had a different attitude for whatever reasons. And putts started going in, and next thing you know, I had a couple good seasons here, which was very nice, and enjoyed the tournament golf. I always enjoyed tournament golf, but you only enjoy it best when you're playing respectable. Not too happy when you're not doing too good.